Hello everybody, we are traveling through space today in no man's sky. Taking a break from my truck across the states, and I am just making it up in the world. Bigger stakes up in space. So today I wanted to just take it easy, explore the world. I am currently on a mission to take a photograph of some volcano area, and I have yet to find the planet I'm supposed to go to, and so I am just, getting going, flipping around space to go to the right planet. Today I also want to talk a little bit about some thoughts I've been having on activism, what it means to be an activist, what it means to advocate for other people. I think for myself this has been a lifelong conundrum about how to do more, what it means to do more, and how I balance the act of doing more and the desire to do more with boundaries with myself and my own needs. And yeah, I feel like for a lot of folks, it's not a feeling that ever goes away. So I want to talk about what to do with those feelings and what I am trying to learn to do with those feelings, and what I hope to be at peace with in the years to come, as I am at the beginning of my social work career. And even, what it means to be a social worker, and how does being an activist and being a social worker, can they mean the same thing in a world where social work is built on all the values that a lot of activists I personally admire fight against? So I think I want to start with things that I feel like I've already been doing. Recently, I have been so fatigued. My ideals clashing with realities, I would have to say. The sheer bureaucracy of the place I work in, the nonprofit I work in, I know it's something people have complained about since time immemorial, since we have created a place that requires such things. But it is really, really disheartening at the same time. Like, I am currently working on a grant, and for a project that I thought was going to be quite simple. It's like creating a tool that can be used for a specific purpose. I didn't realize it was going to take like 2 years and $200,000 to produce a sheet of paper for one specific niche. Ultimately, I feel like I've been trying to be a little bit more self-compassionate. I feel like I have lived in a way where it is very hard to own my own space, because everything is a little bit of a give and take. Like, if I take in any capacity, I feel like I must give so much back. I feel like my way of advocating for myself is picking my battles and really assessing what I have the energy for. And unfortunately, I feel like that means compromising on my own values a little bit, because I don't agree with everything, and just the concept of the type of work we do can be very like white savior. Wow, this planet is quite unusual. It doesn't usually take this long to go into a planet, but This is feeling very interstellar, and we're going very fast. Here we are. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I had to take a brief break, entered that planet, and there was only mushrooms, and I crashed my ship, fought some robots, and now I am back exploring space. There's a space battle behind me? I don't know. There's a space battle behind me. That was just not my monkey, not my circus. Now I'm once again looking for the planet I'm supposed to be going to. I just don't know where it is. When I think about all the things that I wish I were doing, like going on marches and making speeches and, you know, doing all the things that advocates do, I think this year I've really come to learn that there are so many people doing so many incredible things all the time. And I think this image that I had in my head really does not speak to the reality of how much toll it takes, because I feel like when you are out there advocating and fighting for something, there's also an immense amount of frustration where you realize how difficult it is to exist in a world where you have to be so vocal and you have to be so conscious, and you have to be so proactive in seeking out the types of thinkers that make you feel so much less sad about the state of the world, you know? Because I think currently there is much of the world that is rather depressing, and I think I think I talked about this in one of my earlier videos, but hope is a privilege. And hopelessness is a privilege. And so when we come across people who are fighting because they literally cannot afford to not fight, it becomes very difficult to justify all the wallowing that we end up doing. And so I think I've had to really look myself in the mirror and ask myself, what do I really want? What do I want to achieve, and why? Why make that specific thing my business? And I think I also have a really hard time divorcing things from other things, you know, everything to me is so interconnected. Intersectionality these days is such an overused word, but it absolutely warrants that image that at least it has created of connecting all the different parts of ourselves and our communities, and remembering that we exist together, and nothing happens in a vacuum. I've often found myself these days at a crossroads where I am not sure whether to go with my values or my energy levels, maybe. I think I spend way too much time thinking about it philosophically compared to how much I want to actually be doing something about it. And I think this is something that has really been much more prominent since I started at a nonprofit. There's something about the nonprofit life that really makes me unsure what to do with myself. When I think back on people I admire and the things that, the actions that they take, I think of the privilege I have to sit around and dwell in thought. A part of me is trying to constantly remind myself that we all have different ways of thinking and being, and ways of expressing the things that we are thinking and being. And so self-compassion, it comes back to that. At the same time, I want to recognize that advocacy can look like so many things, and I want to break down this idea of constant self-sacrifice in nonprofit spaces, because I think that's kind of how we got to where we are. It's people who give up 200% of themselves, and then they accumulate resentment when it just feels like a never-ending battle, and they're perhaps not enjoying their time on earth the way they want to because of all these battles. And I'm reminded of years ago, I watched Queer Eye with a friend, and it was this one special episode where Jonathan goes back to his old high school and they celebrate his teacher and how, she's done so much for so many kids because she's such a great teacher, and she's really devoted all of herself into teaching and therefore doesn't take care of herself. So I remember thinking that's a pretty wholesome episode, and I didn't think too much of it. But when I showed my friend this episode, he was like, do you think that these people are in this position because they simply don't know what else to do with themselves? This version of self-sacrifice is kind of all they know, and so it becomes their sole source of validation. And I was like, dang, that is so tragic in a way. And I feel like this is definitely a little bit of a gendered situation too, in the way that a lot more women and femmes are expected to carry so much of the world's suffering. I feel like this is true of all helping professions, and so if folks are out there wanting to be a better activist, one of the first things we do is feel guilt about not having been a better activist, or feeling guilt at wanting to enjoy my life. As much as I feel like everybody has a duty to take care of their fellow humans, I also think that we're sort of leaning on extremes here. Either you care about every cause, or you care about no causes, and you are capitalist scum. There are also a lot of people who are simply trying to survive, and it is an immense privilege to have the education to challenge the systems that we have. Because it's so hard too, because I feel like we live in this catch-22 sort of world where education provides a common platform for ideas to be disseminated, but education is also the thing that is upholding and gatekeeping ideas that can help us maintain the status quo. I've been thinking a lot about how to better take advantage of my thoughtfulness and be able to apply it to action. I find myself continually on the side of fear for many things and for many reasons, and as much as I want to honor the instincts that I have, sometimes I wish I could push past them and just do something. So I want to take a moment to honor the little things that I have been doing. I have survived several encounters that were truly, truly uncomfortable. I was put in situations where I have to absorb the type of comments that should not be made in today's day and age. And yet, because of the position of power, because of the threat of safety at some point, whether it's emotional, physical, or whatever type of safety, it's still a very real situation where you can't say anything. It's just not worth picking that fight, because doing so could mean some sort of risk. And I have sat in places that I did not expect to be in, and people are truly trying their best to gather as many parties together as possible and, kind of kumbaya it out. I talked about this in my little discussion about Blood on the Clock Tower, where everyone has a world that they believe in and a thing that they value that is difficult to compromise on. And you end up simply in a standstill, or you end up not really knowing how to engage, or whether or not to engage, because in the moment there isn't really time to consider what is safe or not safe. Yeah, when I find myself stuck in these situations, I often wish I were braver so I could push through in some way and say the things that I want to say. And then there's that other part of me that's like, wow, it's not my job to educate these people, is it? Isn't it their job to hold up their end of the bargain in caring for our collective humanity? So, truly a lot of dynamics go into this. And of course, I want to touch on too the everyday advocacy that happens whether or not you want it to. Again, I think I always grew up with the notion that you are only an advocate and an activist if you reach a certain level of public inspirational status, cult leader level. But I think in the moment when you are doing it, it's not glamorous. It's not something you want to do. It is like frustration to the point of tears when people treat the thoughts you have as if they are so controversial, and yet to you is so obvious. Like your mere existence as a racialized person, a trans person, a queer person, a femme person. It is like, why is our existence still so political in so many ways? Because you were born with those bodies, you are constantly negotiating safety, and you're constantly advocating for yourself and for others like you or others who suffer in a way that is very dear to you. And you can't understand why people who don't suffer in the same ways can't recognize your suffering and your humanity. And it's as if the whole world has decided on one definition and you just don't fit it. I want to take a moment to recognize that everyday advocacy that happens just in like work and life and school and things like that. As proactive as we have the capacity to be, to engage in the games that the systems want us to play, it is having a lot of meetings, it is writing a lot of emails, and I find that my friends are definitely doing the heavy lifting, in my opinion, because I don't have a very high capacity for this type of thing. I don't do well with things that I feel are stupid and a waste of time. Which is why I think I struggle a lot in an office setting, because everything is made up in some way, and yet as much as I try, I can't really pin down the things that my brain just refuses to engage with because they're stupid. So I've been trying to advocate for myself a lot more too, in trying to finish my practicum sooner, because being in a 4-month unpaid practicum where I am attempting to do equal, if not more, than my paid colleagues, because I am trying to learn as much as possible. So I'm taking on a whole bunch of different roles at that time, and at the same time masquerading as an adult who has everything together, even though I am constantly worried about being able to afford anything at all, including like groceries, and sometimes having to just mooch off others. It's not glamorous. It's not where I thought I would be, having worked for so many years and then coming back to this. It's, yeah, like I think this whole masquerade is very, very strange. But constantly negotiating hours is also exhausting, because I always feel like every time I ask, can I count this? Can I count this? I'm obnoxious. I am being ungrateful for the great opportunities that have been offered to me. And I really feel like that, like that's just how I was raised. I'm also trying to remember that I am a student, even though I am very qualified. I'm not fresh out of college. I've had so much experience in my life. It is really tough to go back to that dynamic where I am beholden to anybody in a way that I wish I didn't have to be, because at the end of the day, like, I really struggle with needing to ask permission for everything, and yet I feel like I must, because that is kind of what the power dynamic dictates. So I want to be very clear that I do see that a lot of this is individual work, but there is also systems work at play, where we have created a situation where, because we are in a non-profitable sector where we don't make that much money, and yet everyone is highly educated and overqualified and primarily female, and we're allowed to not pay them, and we're allowed to expect them to be simply grateful for all the free labor we provide. Just to root ourselves back into the activism piece, at the core of everything, you really cannot take care of anybody else, and it is very difficult to fight for others when you don't take care of yourself. That said, I think there are a lot of people who put in great amounts of time fighting for other people, even when they themselves may not have the resources to sustain themselves. During rallies I've been to, some of the folks who showed up were unhoused. And so I guess I want to double down on the idea that hopelessness is an absolute privilege. I think we have a lot of reading to do to save ourselves from ourselves and the worldviews that we've created, because we have been siloed by so many different types of systems designed to silo us. And I am not sure if I'm doing anything right, or I'm just wasting time, or whatever it is. There's just so much uncertainty. And yet there are so many wonderful people doing incredible things, and I think I really aim to stay rooted in that as part of my advocacy. I want to listen to more voices and connect more people together and really have a better view of what could collectively benefit all of us in a very transformative way. I know I dream a lot about utopias and how it might look should everyone have their needs met. And I don't ever want to stop dreaming of those things. I think part of the advocacy I want to do is to keep my energy up. And to do so, I think it means finding people who energize me, fighting for systems that really work for me, that doesn't drain me, because I want to listen to things that don't feel right. All these things we take for granted, that we assume should be normal, like 8-hour work days where people spend half their time talking because no one could actually work 8 hours straight. It's just a very silly way to take free time away from people where they could actually do very meaningful things, even if they're not paid for it. There's a lot of people who volunteer and would volunteer more if they had the capacity, I think. I have dreams of working with my friends to create spaces where we could really just be ourselves, like this wonderful queer utopia where no one has to be anybody they're not, even for a second. I think when you go into a space and you don't have to think about your breathing, where you can breathe normally at all times. This is something I feel like many people take for granted. When you enter a room and you don't feel like you have to hold your breath, when you can relax your shoulders and be your full self in a room of people, it doesn't matter how much power you gain. That feeling never goes away if the rest of the room feels like a threat to you. Like, I have been in so many spaces where I was shocked because I felt like I've spent so much time doing the work and feeling like I fit in, but just the composition of the room made it really hard to be at ease. And when I'm not at ease, I'm not communicating myself, and there's no amount of practice that could really help you communicate perfectly, especially when everyone in the room poses a threat to you. And sometimes I succeed, and then a remark comes out that reminds me, and I'd simply let my guard down. that's also not okay. And so my friends and I have spent some time talking about what a safe space would look like, a space where folks could like just go into and take off their masks, even in front of strangers. And I remember learning about what coffee shops were originally intended to be. But in order to achieve a third space that has zero barriers, I think that's something we've really lost our sight on. The closest thing would be a library, and something that would never have been built if the idea was conceived today. But libraries are being defunded. They are not receiving the supports that they need, particularly those that exist among populations that may require a lot more support. There just simply aren't any alternatives for free, accessible buildings for one to chill in. And that's really sad. So instead, our world has decided to fragment advocacy and services into all sorts of different nonprofits and split them into different mandates so that they don't communicate with each other. So we can only help the person right in front of us and never address the problems of those who don't fit under that funding structure. And those funds, you have to bend over backwards, write those grants, write those pleas, give your statistics, and make sure the people at the top of the government understand that you are not a threat to power in any way. So my friends and I, we simply want a wonderful queer space where there are activities, there are food readily accessible, there are comfy chairs, and you can just come in, kick back, and like meet someone new. Someone who doesn't pose a threat to you because you can trust that they understand what it's like to go through some of the things that you've gone through, or they're understanding and open-minded enough that they can try to understand the things that you have gone through. It's almost not right that the profession of social work exists because we have allowed this one group of people to have a monopoly on compassion and wanting to help. All of these categories we put people into, it doesn't make any sense. So at the end of the day, it is really hard for me to talk about the things that I'm doing, the things that I recognize to be advocacy, and the things I want to do. Because there's so much I want to do, I feel like there is so much I don't know yet, and things come up as I go, opportunities come up. I think meeting people is one of the only things that is never a waste of time for me. I can meet really awful people, and I've been stuck with many awful people in the past, but I think that in itself is a lesson too. I think understanding each other, understanding where different values and beliefs come from is so incredibly valuable. Even if you are viscerally uncomfortable. So at the end of this video, I just want to say I so appreciate all the people I've met and all the lessons I've learned over time and all the people who have made these lessons possible. I'm so grateful to be surrounded by people who can help me forget that the world is as unforgiving as it can be sometimes. And yeah, I am just grateful all the time for all the things that I have. And I think that's why I find it very difficult to accept what we have and not fight for something better for all of us. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. I hope we can talk again soon.